Two sharp raps on the window shattered the quiet of the humid May evening. Dr. Lena Sterling didn't flinch. She knew this routine. Outside, Officer Nolan Burke's reflection stared back, his face a mask of bored authority. He'd already made up his mind about her before she even lowered the glass. For Burke, the call had been routine. A suspicious vehicle in a quiet lot off Maple Drive. 10 years policing the suburbs of Northwood, Ohio, and suspicious always meant the same thing. Someone was somewhere they didn't belong. He saw the dark gray Jeep Grand Cherokee and the black woman behind the wheel, and his gut gave him the answer he expected. He moved with a heavy, deliberate slowness, the kind that was meant to intimidate long before a word was spoken. He rapped his knuckles on the glass, hard and loud. The window slid down just a few inches. The woman was in a business blazer, her gaze direct and unflinching. That steady calm irritated Burke instantly. No fear, he thought. She's played this game before. License and registration, Burke said, his voice flat. Good evening, officer, she replied, her tone as crisp and professional as her attire. Is there a reason for this stop? Always a question, he fumed internally. Aloud, he said, I ask the questions here. Hand them over. Now. Her movements were unhurried, measured. She wasn't scrambling, she was complying. But to Burke, her composure felt like defiance. He peered into her car. No stray papers, no fast food wrappers. It was immaculate. Too clean, he decided. The kind of car you keep when you don't want to leave a trace. She passed him a Colorado driver's license. Dr. Lena Sterling. Colorado? Burke's voice dripped with disbelief. You're a long way from the mountains, Doc. What's a doctor doing sitting in a parking lot? I'm a consultant on a temporary project, she said, her tone perfectly level. Consultant, Burke repeated, stretching the word out like a bad smell. Right. And I suppose your project requires you to case the neighborhood? I needed a quiet place to work. That was enough. Her story was too smooth, her car too clean, and her calm was just plain unnatural. It was an act. His ego flared, certain she thought she could play him for a fool. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. She held his gaze for a long moment. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Not fear, but a profound weariness. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Of course! She stood beside the Jeep, poised and still, as Burke keyed his radio to call for backup. This woman was too cool, too collected. People like that were often the most dangerous. While he waited, she simply watched him, her posture so confident it felt like she was the one in control. Minutes later, a second cruiser swung into the lot. His partner, Vince Rourke, was here. Now the pressure starts, Burke thought, a surge of satisfaction running through him. That calm is about to break. Rourke ambled over with a lazy swagger, circling Dr. Sterling like a predator sizing up its prey. A smirk played on his lips as he looked her up and down. Well, well, Nolan, he said, popping his gum loudly. What did you catch? Looks a little fancy for our neck of the woods. Burke handed him the ID. Says she's a consultant from Colorado. Dr. Lena Sterling. Rourke barely glanced at it. Dr. Lena Sterling, he said, deliberately mispronouncing her name. He looked back at her. Tell you what, we'll just call you Lena. Simpler. He tossed the license back to Burke. So, Lena, what's a consultant doing in a 5-year-old Grand Cherokee? Business must be slow, huh? The insult hung in the air, slick and casual. Dr. Sterling's expression remained a mask of neutrality. Is there an issue with my vehicle, officer? We'll decide what the issue is, Rourke snapped, his friendly act vanishing. He leaned in close to Burke. She's got an answer for everything. I don't like it. You run her yet? Just did, Burke said, his own frustration mounting as he stared at his patrol tablet in disbelief. No flags, no priors, no warrants. How? A woman like her, in a car this clean? There was always something. She's clean, he said through gritted teeth. Clean? Rourke scoffed. Nobody's clean. He turned back to Dr. Sterling. All right, Lena, let's try again. What kind of consulting are you doing out here? And spare me the corporate buzzwords. I've already given the officer my statement. No, you've given us a story, Burke interjected, stepping forward. And it's not holding up. I'm searching your vehicle. On what grounds? She asked, her eyes locking onto his. This was the moment. On the grounds that you're in a private lot after hours, your story doesn't add up. And frankly, you fit a profile, he bluffed. That's all the grounds I need. She looked from him to Rourke, and that weary look returned, deeper this time, as if she were rewatching a scene she'd seen 100 times before. She gave a single sharp nod. The rear is unlocked. Rourke swung open the hatch and started tearing through her things. He unzipped an empty laptop bag and tossed it onto the asphalt. He found a box of protein bars, shook it, and then, accidentally, crushed it under his hand. Oops, he sneered. Guess you'll have to skip breakfast. Burke ignored him, his eyes scanning the interior panels. And then he saw it, a small black Velcro square on the carpeted sidewall. Aha! What have we here? He announced, pointing. Looks like a spot for some serious hardware. Who are you tracking, Lena? Her head snapped toward him, her calm finally breaking, replaced by something cold and hard. Her eyes turned to steel. Officer, she said, her voice low and sharp, I strongly advise you to stop what you're doing. Immediately. The raw command in her voice was so absolute it nearly stopped him. But Nolan Burke's pride was already in a freefall. I don't think so, he sneered, the words feeling weak even to him. You're out of answers. Turn around, hands on the hood of the car. For a tense second, she just stared at him. Then with a slow, deliberate grace that felt like an insult, she turned and placed her palms flat on the Jeep's hood. Vince Rourke moved in behind her, ready to begin the pat-down. Just as his hands were about to touch the shoulders of her blazer, she spoke again. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the humid night air like a scalpel. Left, inside, pocket. Rourke froze, his hands hovering in the air. She didn't turn her head. I said, left inside pocket, and I suggest you do it very, very carefully. Rourke shot a look at Burke, his smug confidence evaporating into a cloud of pure uncertainty. Burke gave a sharp, impatient nod. Get on with it. Rourke reached into her blazer as if expecting a snake to bite him. He pulled out a fine leather wallet and flipped it open. A silver and gold seal caught the light. An eagle's head superimposed on a compass rose, the official seal of the Central Intelligence Agency. Oh, hell, Rourke whispered, taking a full step back as if the wallet had electrocuted him. Burke snatched it from his partner's hand, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. The badge was heavy. It was real. He forced his eyes to focus on the credentials, his blood turning to ice water in his veins. Special Agent Lena Sterling, Counter-Proliferation Center. She turned around slowly, her face an unreadable mask of cold fury. Her eyes bored into Burke's, and he felt pinned by her gaze. Do you have any idea what you've done? She asked, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a collapsing building. The professional calm was gone, replaced by a low, furious growl. She took a step forward, turning her full attention on both men. For the first time, they saw the warrior under the blazer. Listen to me, she said, stabbing a finger first at Burke, then at Rourke. Because of your cheap power trip, a year-long investigation into an international arms trafficker is blowing up in my face right now. You didn't just compromise my cover, you may have just signed the death warrant for 2 other agents in the field. She took another step, her eyes burning with intensity. Your careers, they are the absolute least of my concerns right now. But I promise you, when this is over, I will personally make sure the only uniform you 2 ever wear again has a name tag and ask if people want fries with that. Now get back to your vehicle and do not move. Am I understood? They both gave a jerky, terrified nod, utterly speechless. Agent Sterling spun around and moved to the back of her Jeep. She popped a hidden latch in the floor, revealing a false compartment. Inside lay a compact plate carrier, magazines for a pistol, a radio earpiece, and a small tactical drone. The 2 cops watched in stunned silence as the consultant began methodically gearing up for combat. She snapped the earpiece into her ear and tapped it. Argus, this is Nightingale. Do you copy? A calm, distorted voice crackled in the quiet lot, loud enough for them to hear. Solid copy, Nightingale. We have eyes on you, and we have eyes on the asset. He's on the move. Understood, Sterling said. She slammed a fresh magazine into her pistol and chambered around. The clack-clack of the slide was deafening in the silence. Is our secondary team in position? Affirmative. They're moving to intercept, but you are the tip of the spear. We go on your signal. Just as she was about to respond, a silver Toyota Camry with tinted windows pulled out from behind a nearby building. Its headlights were off. "There's my signal," Sterling whispered, her eyes locking onto the car. She tapped her earpiece again. "Argus, target is in a silver Camry, no lights, heading for the south exit. I'm moving to engage. Tell our backup to hold for my signal. We are live." She drew her pistol, holding it low and ready. She gave the two local cops one last, withering glance. "Stay here. Don't talk. Don't even breathe loud. My support team is watching. If you so much as flinch, they will solve the problem. Stay put." And with that, Special Agent Sterling melted into the shadows, a ghost moving with deadly purpose toward the slow-rolling sedan. Burke and Rourke stood frozen, the weight of their colossal blunder crushing the air from their lungs. Their worlds had shrunk to a single terrifying realization. They were two fools who had just kicked a hornet's nest the size of a mountain. A moment later, a black Chevy Tahoe pulled silently into the lot and stopped. A tall man in a sharp suit stepped out. His movements were calm, his face impassive, but he radiated an immense, unshakable authority. "Officers," the man said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm Deputy Director Alden. Your shift is done. You're with me now." He gestured with his head toward the open rear door of the Tahoe. It wasn't a request. Burke and Rourke exchanged a single panicked glance before walking, stiff-legged, toward the vehicle. They moved past silent, professional agents who were now emerging from the shadows to secure the scene. None of them gave the two cops a second look. They were ghosts already. A junior agent closed the heavy truck door behind them, sealing them in. The inside of the Tahoe was cold and silent. Alden sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. The vehicle pulled away from the scene, but it didn't turn toward the Northwood precinct. It headed for the interstate. After several minutes of agonizing silence, Alden finally spoke, his calm voice making his words all the more terrifying. "I read your files on the way over here," he began, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "On paper, you're passable street cops. But paper doesn't show the rot. It doesn't show the cheap satisfaction you get from leaning on someone you think is beneath you." He finally angled his head, his cold eyes finding theirs in the rearview mirror. "Tonight, you didn't just hassle a federal agent. Tonight, your lazy prejudices and your $10 badges led you straight into the final act of Operation Iron Stork. Agent Sterling has been undercover for 6 months, living next to a man who sells missiles to terrorists. A risk you multiplied by 1,000 because your feelings got hurt when a black woman in a nice car didn't cower when you raised your voice. A risk you amplified by 1,000 because your fragile egos couldn't handle a black woman who didn't tremble when you spoke." The Tahoe pulled into a secure underground garage. Deputy Director Alden led them to a featureless room, its only furniture a steel table and 3 chairs. He placed a thin folder on the table's surface. "This is where your careers end," Alden stated, his voice flat as he sat opposite them. "The only question is how." He leaned forward. "Option 1, I charge you both with felony obstruction of a national security operation. Your badges will be stripped, your faces will be on the news, and you will serve time in a federal prison." He let the silence confirm their fate. "Option 2, he continued, sliding 2 documents from the folder. "You sign these resignations, effective immediately. Your involvement tonight is buried under a mountain of classified paperwork. You walk out of here and disappear. You simply cease to exist as police officers." He pushed the papers and 2 pens across the table. "You have 1 minute to decide which future you want." Officer Rourke, his face slick with sweat, lunged for the pen as if it were a lifeline, his signature a frantic, jagged scrawl. Officer Burke stared at the document. A decade of his life, every arrest, every gut feeling that was really just cheap prejudice had led him to this quiet, humiliating end in a concrete box. He signed his name, and his entire identity vanished with the ink. "A logical choice," Alden said, collecting the papers without emotion. He knocked once on the door. A silent agent appeared. "Escort them out." They were marched down a corridor and shoved through a heavy steel door into a dark alley they didn't recognize. The door slammed shut, a final metallic sound severing them from their former lives. Stripped of everything that had defined them, they stood in the darkness. A moment later, a dark gray Jeep Grand Cherokee passed by at the end of the alley. Special Agent Sterling was at the wheel, her face illuminated by the glow of a screen, already fighting the next battle in a war they never even knew existed. She didn't look their way. They were a footnote in her report, already forgotten.